Fiscal policy is like the thermostat of a house. Its main objectives are 1. Stabilization, keep inflation and output gaps small. 2. Growth, raise the long-run level of real output. And 3. Redistribution, reduce inequality by moving resources from higher income to lower income groups. The government has 3 main instruments. Taxation, direct taxes such as income tax, indirect taxes such as value-added tax. Transfers and subsidies, unemployment benefits, food stamps, corporate subsidies. Direct government purchases of goods and services, infrastructure, defense, education. Constraints are the practical limits that stop policy from being unlimited. Political constraints, election cycles, lobbying, public opinion. Timing lags, recognition lag, detecting a problem, decision lag, legislating a response, and implementation lag, spending the money. Legal and institutional debt limits, for example, a constitutional debt ceiling. Crowding out risk, borrowing can push up interest rates and hurt private investment. International credibility, large deficits may raise sovereign risk premia. Just as a thermostat cannot heat the house infinitely because of power capacity limits, fiscal policy cannot be unlimited because of these constraints. Explanation. The fiscal multiplier measures how much total output, Y, changes when the government changes its spending, G, or taxes, T. Start with a simple closed economy identity. Y equals C of Y minus T plus I plus G plus NX, where consumption C depends on disposable income. Y minus T assumes C equals C0 plus C times Y minus T with marginal propensity to consume C, and imports are a fixed fraction M of income. NX equals negative MY substituting gives Y equals C0 plus C times Y minus T plus I plus G minus MY. Collecting Y terms, Y times 1 minus C plus M equals C0 plus I plus G minus CT. Therefore, the change in output from a change in G, holding everything else constant, is delta Y equals 1 over 1 minus C times 1 minus T plus M times delta G, where T is the average tax rate because a part of the G increase will be financed by taxes. The term in the denominator is called the multiplier denominator. Its inverse is the fiscal multiplier, K. Determinants of K, higher C, meaning more willingness to spend out of income, leads to a larger multiplier. Higher T, meaning more tax leakage, leads to a smaller multiplier because part of the extra income is taxed away. Higher M, meaning a bigger import share, leads to a smaller multiplier because part of the extra spending leaks abroad. Expectations and price rigidity also matter. In a highly flexible price environment, the multiplier is lower. Numerical illustration. Suppose C equals 0.80, T equals 0.20, M equals 0.15. Then the denominator is 1 minus 0.80 times 1 minus 0.20 plus 0.15, which equals 1 minus 0.64 plus 0.15, which equals 0.51. Thus K equals 1 divided by 0.51, approximately 1.96. A $100 billion increase in G raises GDP by about $196 billion. If the same $100 billion is financed by a tax cut, delta T equals negative 100, the multiplier becomes negative C times 1 minus T divided by 1 minus C times 1 minus T plus M, which equals negative 0.64 divided by 0.51, approximately negative 1.25, so output rises by $125 billion. The sign is positive because a tax cut raises disposable income, but the magnitude is smaller than the spending multiplier because part of the tax cut is saved. A budget deficit occurs when the government spends more than it taxes in a given year. Primary deficit, abbreviated PD, equals G minus T excluding interest. Total deficit includes interest payments on existing debt. Deficit sub T equals PD sub T plus R times B sub T minus 1, where R is the real interest rate and B sub T minus 1 is the stock of debt. Debt dynamics are captured by the law of motion. B sub T equals open parenthesis 1 plus R close parenthesis times B sub T minus 1 plus G sub T minus T sub T. Dividing by nominal GDP, Y sub T, gives the debt to GDP ratio B sub T equals B sub T divided by Y sub T using the growth rate of GDP, G, where Y sub T equals open parenthesis 1 plus G close parenthesis times Y sub T minus 1, we obtain B sub t equals open parenthesis 1 plus r close parenthesis divided by open parenthesis 1 plus g close parenthesis times b sub t minus 1 plus open parenthesis g sub t minus t sub t close parenthesis divided by y sub t. The sustainability condition requires that b sub t does not explode over time. A sufficient condition is that the effective interest growth differential is less than 1, and that the primary balance is at least as large as the excess of interest over growth. R less than G, or PD divided by Y, is less than or equal to open parenthesis G minus R close parenthesis times B sub T minus 1. If R is greater than G, the government must run a primary surplus that is big enough to offset the interest rate drag. Numerical example. Assume G equals 0.03, 3% real GDP growth, R equals 0.05, 5% real interest, and the debt to GDP ratio today is B sub T minus 1 equals 60%. The term open parenthesis 1 plus R close parenthesis divided by open parenthesis 1 plus G close parenthesis is approximately 1.05 divided by 1.03, which is approximately 1.019. Even with a primary balance of 0, the ratio would rise by about 1.9% each year. To keep the ratio constant, the primary surplus must satisfy PD divided by Y equals open parenthesis R minus G close parenthesis times B equals open parenthesis 0.05 minus 0.03 close parenthesis times 0.6 equals 0.012. That is a 1.2% of GDP surplus. Any smaller surplus leads to debt growth. Any larger surplus reduces debt. Automatic stabilizers and discretionary fiscal measures are two ways governments try to smooth the business cycle. What they are: automatic stabilizers built in tax and transfer rules that react to income without new legislation, for example, progressive income tax, unemployment benefits. Discretionary fiscal measures, new policies deliberately enacted by Congress or Parliament, for example, a stimulus package, tax cut, infrastructure program. Timing automatic stabilizers immediate. They operate as soon as households' incomes change. Because the tax code and benefit formulas automatically adjust discretionary fiscal measures. Delayed require recognition lag. Political debate, voting, and implementation lag often take months to become effective. Magnitude automatic stabilizers typically moderate, limited by the design of the tax benefit system. Discretionary fiscal measures can be large depending on political will and fiscal space. Political cost automatic stabilizers low, no new votes needed, hence less controversy. Discretionary fiscal measures high, subject to partisan bargaining, media scrutiny, and may be reversed later. Example exam question. Automatic stabilizers explain why a rise in unemployment automatically increases government spending and reduces tax revenue, and how this stabilizes output. Discretionary fiscal measures compare the short-run impact on aggregate demand of $200 billion discretionary infrastructure program versus $200 billion increase in unemployment benefits under a progressive tax system. In an exam, you would first define each tool, then discuss the speed of response, the size of the effect, and the political feasibility. Highlight that automatic stabilizers are like a car's cruise control, they adjust continuously, while discretionary measures are like the driver manually pressing the accelerator. Both tools affect the fiscal multiplier, but automatic stabilizers usually have a smaller multiplier because they are partially offset by opposite tax effects, whereas a well-timed discretionary expansion can generate a larger multiplier if implemented when the economy is far below potential. Crowding out and Ricardian equivalence are two theoretical lenses on how government borrowing influences the private sector. When the government finances a deficit by issuing bonds, the demand for loanable funds rises. In the ISLM framework, the LM curve shifts left, the equilibrium interest rate, R, rises and private investment, I, falls. I equals I naught minus alpha R, alpha greater than 0. If the government increases G by delta G and finances it by borrowing, the rise in R reduces I by alpha times delta R, partially offsetting the stimulus. The net effect on output is therefore smaller than the fiscal multiplier calculated without considering private sector responses. Proposed by Robert Barrow, it argues that rational households anticipate future taxes needed to repay government debt, so they increase saving today to offset the expected tax burden. C equals a plus B times open parenthesis Y minus T minus B close parenthesis, where B is the present value of government bonds held by the public. A rise in government borrowing, delta B greater than 0, reduces current consumption by B times delta B, exactly canceling the increase in G, assuming lump sum taxes later. Hence, the fiscal multiplier is 0. Both concepts rely on strong assumptions: perfect capital markets, infinite horizons, and forward-looking households for Ricardian equivalence, and a frictionless loan market for crowding out. In the real world, empirical evidence finds a partial crowding out. Some investment is postponed, and limited Ricardian behavior. Most households do not fully internalize future taxes. Assume alpha equals 0.5, baseline R equals 4%, and a $100 billion increase in G financed by borrowing. The bond issue pushes R up to 4.2%, delta R equals 0.2%. Investment falls by 0.5 times 0.2 equals $0.1 billion, a tiny crowding out in this simplified example. Under Ricardian equivalence with B equals 0.6, households would cut consumption by 0.6 times 100 equals $60 billion, completely nullifying the stimulus. The two effects operate in opposite directions. Crowding out reduces the multiplier, Ricardian equivalence can eliminate it altogether. Explanation: in an open economy, the same fiscal actions have additional channels through exchange rates and the balance of payments. The Mundell-Fleming model extends the ISLM framework by adding the foreign exchange market. Key equations: I star colon y equals C of y minus T plus I of R plus G plus NX of E, y star, where net exports NX depend negatively on the real exchange rate E, higher E meaning domestic currency appreciation. Del M colon M over P equals L of R, Y's. Foreign exchange market B P curve colon capital flows equalize the domestic interest rate R with the world rate R star plus the expected depreciation of the currency, uncovered interest parity. R equals R star plus the expected change in E over E, that is E of ET plus 1 minus ET divided by ET. Fiscal expansion under a fixed exchange rate. When the peg is credible, the central bank stands ready to buy or sell foreign currency to keep E constant. An increase in G shifts IS star to the right, raising R higher R triggers capital inflows, creating excess foreign exchange supply. To maintain the peg, the central bank purchases domestic currency, which reduces the monetary base and shifts LM left, pushing R back to R star. The net effect on output is small, fiscal policy is largely neutral. Fiscal expansion under a flexible exchange rate. The same rightward shift of IS star raises R above R star. No automatic capital inflow occurs because the exchange rate can adjust. The higher R leads to an appreciation of the domestic currency, E falls. An appreciated currency reduces net exports, NX falls, partially offsetting the initial boost from G. The overall multiplier is therefore smaller than in a closed economy. Balance of payments implication. The balance of payments identity is current account plus capital account plus financial account equals 0. Under a fixed rate, a fiscal deficit improves the current account via higher Y, but worsens the capital and financial accounts because of the necessary monetary contraction. Under a flexible rate, the current account deteriorates as net exports fall, while the capital and financial accounts may improve due to higher R attracting capital. The final impact on the balance of payments depends on the relative magnitudes. Numerical illustration: flexible rate. Assume C equals 0.6, T equals 0.2, M equals 0.2, R star equals 4%, and the exchange rate elasticity of net exports eta equals negative 0.5. A $100 billion rise in G gives a closed economy multiplier of 1 divided by 1 minus 0.6 times 0.8 plus 0.2, which is 1 over 0.52, approximately 1.92, resulting in a change in Y of about $192 billion. The higher income raises R by 0.3 percentage points from the LM curve. The currency appreciates, reducing NX by eta times change in E times Y, approximately 0.5 times 0.03 times 192, about $2.9 billion, a small offset. The net effect remains positive but below the closed economy case. Tax structure determines who legally pays the tax, while tax incidence tells us who actually bears the economic burden after markets adjust. Progressive tax rate increases with income, for example, personal income tax. Proportional, also called flat, same rate for all incomes. Regressive, lower income groups pay a higher share, for example payroll tax capped at a maximum. Incidence, the statutory payer may shift part of the burden to others. For a tax on labor, wage tax, employers may lower wages. For a tax on capital, returns to investors fall. The final incidence depends on the elasticities of supply and demand. Laffer curve, tax revenue R of tau equals tau times B of tau, where B of tau is the tax base, total taxable income. The base usually falls as tau rises because higher rates discourage work, investment, or encourage evasion. A simple quadratic example. B of tau equals B0 minus D times tau, D greater than 0. Then R of tau equals tau times parentheses B0 minus D tau parentheses, which simplifies to B0 tau minus D tau squared, a parabola opening downward. The revenue maximizing rate is found by the derivative of R with respect to tau equal to 0, which gives B0 minus 2D tau equals 0, so tau star equals B0 divided by 2D. Quantitative example. Suppose the untaxed potential base is B0 equal to $200 billion and the sensitivity parameter D equal to 160 billion per unit tax rate. Then revenue R of tau equals 200 tau minus 160 tau squared. The revenue maximizing rate, tau star equals 200 divided by 2 times 160, which equals 0.625 or 62.5%. Revenue at tau star equals 200 times 0.625 minus 160 times 0.625 squared, which is approximately 125 minus 62.5 equals $62.5 billion. If the government raises tau to 0.80, revenue falls to 200 times 0.80 minus 160 times 0.80 squared, which is 160 minus 102.4 equals 57.6 billion, illustrating the downward sloping part of the Laffer curve. In economies with high elasticities, for example many alternative jobs, the base falls quickly, so the optimal tau is lower. In low elasticity economies, for example monopoly profits, the base is less responsive, allowing higher optimal rates. Understanding incidence helps avoid regressive outcomes. A tax on goods with inelastic demand, for example cigarettes, will fall mostly on consumers, while a tax on capital may shift the burden to workers if capital is mobile. These concepts equip MBA students to evaluate real-world tax reforms, such as the 2017 U.S. Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which lowered corporate tax rates from 35% to 21%, aiming to move the economy toward the upward side of the Laffer curve. Explanation: government spending can be split into 3 broad categories, each affecting aggregate demand, AD, differently. 1. Government consumption, G sub C, purchases of goods and services that provide immediate utility, for example salaries of civil servants, defense equipment, police. These items are part of aggregate demand directly. A D equals C plus I plus G sub C plus G sub I plus NX plus TR times C. 2. Government investment, G sub I, spending on capital projects that increase the productive capacity of the economy, such as infrastructure, research labs, schools. While counted as part of aggregate demand today, G sub I also raises future potential output, Y star, shifting the long-run aggregate supply curve to the right. 3. Transfer payments, TR, cash or in-kind benefits, unemployment insurance, pensions, subsidies. Transfers do not enter aggregate demand directly because they are not purchases of goods. However, they increase households' disposable income, inducing consumption. Delta C equals C times delta TR, where C is the marginal propensity to consume out of transfer income. Hence, the effective aggregate demand impact of transfers is C times TR. A D component analysis. Suppose the economy is below potential output. The government decides on a $50 billion mix, $30 billion in G sub C, $10 billion in G sub I, and $10 billion in transfers. With a marginal propensity to consume C equals 0.75, the total boost to aggregate demand is. Direct effect of G sub C equals $30 billion. Direct effect of G sub I equals $10 billion, treated like investment. Indirect effect of transfers equals C times $10 billion, which is $7.5 billion. Total initial increase in aggregate demand equals $47.5 billion. If the fiscal multiplier for government spending is K sub G equals 1.8, and for transfers it is K sub T equals C times K sub G, which is 0.75 times 1.8 equals 1.35, the final impact on equilibrium output is delta Y equals K sub G times the sum of $30 and $10, plus K sub T times $10, which equals 1.8 times 40 plus 1.35 times 10, which equals 72 plus 13.5, which equals $85.5 billion. Real-world illustration. After the 2008 financial crisis, many countries used large infrastructure programs, G sub I, to stimulate demand and improve long-run productivity. At the same time, expanded unemployment benefits, TR, supported consumption. The mix of spending types determines not only the short-run boost to aggregate demand, but also the path of future growth. Understanding the classification helps managers anticipate how fiscal policy will affect their market. A rise in G sub C for defense may boost suppliers of weapons, while G sub I in roads can increase demand for construction firms, and transfers can raise household spending on retail goods.